work with the gospel, right? That is the challenges. What about the planting institution to planting indigenous contextualized churches? As American, we go out and usually we do what we see, what we learn, right? That's planting institutions, schools and hospitals and then some centers. But how can you get out of it and then think about planting indigenous and contextualized churches? Meaning it's not our churches, but think about local people's church. Do we don't have to make the church like always a cross and then like a triangles, towers there and churches. And I don't know how many people are comfortable with it. And in the beginning, so a lot of people, nowadays it's okay, and a long time ago, and when the missionaries came to Korea, and then churches like not the Western church, but nowadays mostly Western church, but little bit changed nowadays, and then they use buildings, rental buildings, and then like theaters and different, right? And but long time ago, when started church in North Korea, and then there was traditional house as a church. That's a contextualized churches. What about the conversion to, as implying cultural discontinuity to conversion as involving worldview? What it means that, okay, I become a Christian and then I abandon all my past and what I learned, what I had, but I'm gonna rebuild my values, all this based on the Western Christianity. Otherwise, okay, conversion involving word, okay. This is what I have, but this is not biblical. And then I try to fix this one. You don't have to take the Western way. You will take your own way based on what you learn, what you grow. But focus on the biblical, not the cultural. So one of the failures is that try to emphasize just all outside activity, like, okay, I go to church. Or you become a Christian, you come to church every Sunday, like this. Right? But if they don't change to see the world with a biblical perspective, and then we cannot say it's the same as people, right? That means that conversion involved in worldview. So you gotta change. The people who converted to Christianity, and then their perspective should be changed, right? That one is kind of big challenges. What about from the inadequate training model to move throughout missiological training? Whatever inadequate, maybe just giving the knowledge of theologies, and sometimes we don't understand the cultural differences, and because of the cultural superiorities there, and then it's a lot of things, but more missiological training, and think about the language, they think about the worldview, think about their cultures. Right? Nowadays, the globalization is contribute a lot of benefits, but think about getting the culture-wise and getting westernized, like wherever we go and you can say McDonald's and Coca-Cola, that's a big influence. on the native, the indigenous people's life. They are losing the traditions and they are losing the heritage that they had. And people think about in Western influence and then think about that is a part of a lot of people say that they go to church and it's a part of Western church's culture is the biblical. Not all the time, right? There's a challenge. So if you see the basic things and then that's what I want to say. A little bit break down and a little bit easy way. David Jones, he said that he mentioned three kind of concerns, really issues nowadays, and one is contextualization, gospel relevance. I don't know whether you guys live in from the Asian countries and maybe European countries, and I'm from Korea, and then I know my culture. But my education is influenced by the Western cultures. But if you go to Mexico and down there, and there's a Catholic countries, so more than 80% are Catholic. Nowadays, there are a lot of evangelical Christians there, but still, really Catholic dominant country. When you present the gospel, they know already Jesus Christ. It's not new. That's part of their culture. But they pray to Guadalupe. It's just different. They believe Jesus Christ and they believe, but Guadalupe is more important. So when you go to kind of temple inside the market, I've been there, and then always we consider who is the greatest figure in the temple. It's not a one small place, and then they put the statues, and Jesus Christ statues there, and Guadalupe statues there, and people come whenever they have time, they pray. So just when you go to other countries like Mexico and they never heard about the gospel, how can they understand the gospel? Even though we explain and they don't understand. Right? Maybe if they have wrong information about Christianity and wrong information about Jesus Christ, even the Muslims acknowledge Jesus Christ. But one of a prophet, it's not a Messiah. But how can we communicate Jesus Christ in their understanding with the relevance of life? That's one of the big things. What about another thing is how can we empower the indigenous missions effort? It's not just work for the missionaries and the work for the sending churches. No. How can we empower the native, indigenous people and indigenous missions, like national missions, right? You can just think about if you go to India and then you cannot reach out to all Indian people. How can you empower the Indians and create a visioning about reaching out to their own people and willing to go? That is a big trend, one of the big trends. What about the holistic gospel-centered ministry? conservative Christians always emphasize about the proclaiming the gospel, right? Proclaim the gospel because they really emphasis on saving a soul. But little bit liberal or other side, and they really concerned about the social issues. People are dying because of hunger. People are suppressed because of the evil, wicked, evil regime. Because of them, they are really limited to access by the gospel, to access to the gospel. They wanna be a Christian, but still they have to deal with a lot of stuff, right? Holistic gospel center means that you gotta take care about the proclaim the gospel. You gotta take care about the real life. You cannot separate together, but we gotta work together. That's a holistic mission. Radicals really emphasize on the social issues, people's life, but conservatives really emphasize on the proclaiming the gospel. We cannot separate. Nowadays we gotta talk, we gotta put together and work together for the people who need Jesus Christ. That's a holistic gospel-centered ministry. That's a big things nowadays, right? And you can see what is the overlap in previous kind of challenges and contextualization. And what about the empowering? And it's kind of local people, centered. What about the holistic? We gotta care about their life, not the spiritual aspect as well, also physical aspect of life. So we're gonna talk about the issues to discuss in this class, and paternalism and contextualization, and we talked about last week, 2 weeks ago, and when we study the culture. And we're gonna talk about today kind of ethnocentrism and then discipleship. Why do we need, right? Let's start off with paternalism. What is a paternalism? What is a paternalism that you think? And just think about the second stage of the church activity in local churches, with the local churches, and suggested by the Harold Muller, and that is a parenting stage, right? Paternalism is like, I'm gonna give you a dictionary and definition is there, and then maybe to understand, it's better understand the definitions. A system under which an authority undertakes to supply needs and regulate the conduct of those under its control in matters affecting them as individuals, as in the relationship to authority and each other. That is the dictionary's definition, though. Think about the relationship between the parents and children. It's easier. That's why paternal relation, paternalism. And that paternalism can be, also implies that the behavior against the regardless of the will of the person, mean that to think about the indigenous people and missionary, and that's between missionary and indigenous people. But regardless of the will of the indigenous person, also that the behavior expresses an attitude of superiority. One is kind of my attitude kind of shows what? Superiority. So paternalism and paternalist, have been used pejorative, for example, in the context of societal or the political realm and the references. So paternalism involved in the interference of the individual or organization or the state on the life of other person or persons without consulting their will. That is the paternalism. And the missionaries can influence the indigenous people regardless of the indigenous people's will. Sometimes they don't like it, but they have to follow the missionaries because they are totally they are depends on the missionaries resources, right? And that is kind of I'm the patron. You need to take care of it. You are still young. You don't have much. I have a lot. Right? That kind of paternalism. How can the paternalism is created? How? So one thing is that already we saw the definitions and the cultural superiority. Okay, I'm more civilized because of my education, and I have a more higher standard of living that you guys don't have. I am more like sanities and all kind of stuff. I have more knowledge of the world, right? Some of them are true, but not all the time. If you go to another countries, you don't know their language. Who is expert on language? You gotta learn the language. That's a big challenge for the missionaries. You don't know their cultures. That's a big challenge for the missionaries. Even though they try to understand their cultures maybe for a lifetime, if you live with them and then you wanna part of your community and then you kind of live with their life and you see them and you may understand. But once a week you meet and twice a week because of the Bible studies, because of the meeting, and then it's hard. Maybe you can have some knowledge, but your action is different, your behavior is different, right? We acknowledge the difference, but our behavior is different. Here is kind of 4 ways to create paternalism. Money and resources that influence when, where, how work is done, and or aid is granted and used. What? The money, eventually money. Money is power. Missionaries going to other countries and usually a lot of time they go to poor countries, like developing countries, not the European countries. Nowadays, a lot of people go to European countries because they are not a lot of non-Christian, non-believers nowadays. And just think about the ratio of money. I already told you last week, and if you work in Mexico, it's like if you don't have any skill set, and then $10 per day. But if you work here, even though you don't have any skill set, it's about $10 to $15 per hour. They know the money of power, and if you listen to the missionaries, and maybe he's gonna provide some for your living, your families, your need. That's why money and resources influence people those who don't have, right? So just it's kind of just word that we talk all the time, and missionaries, even though they go and then just think about it, how much they spend, and when they go to other countries, even though they like here living is like you have 4 families here, at least you need around 4,000 and 5,000 per month. Or you need a rent, you need a car and insurance and basic. Even though your life is not that luxurious. Nowadays, what's a rent cost? So expensive. 1 bedroom is about $2,000. Well, I know. I went to Mexico. Mexico is Guadalajara, and then it's a 3 bedroom. It's not that big like American house, but still 3 bedroom, and then around $400 per month, right? And then if you go to a little bit low, then it's kind of people. It's like inner city, and then they it's not a good place, but they charge $100 per month. So money, you gotta be careful though. You gotta be careful when you go down. That's why I told you before, and then we gotta really watch out our spending in mission field, our giving in mission field. Money is totally different. Sometimes methodologies are exported without regard to the new context. We are really used to, and we try to learn. We try to the method in our way. We are used to, but the native don't know how to do it. Right? And I know it's a lot of struggling training the local people. I work with a missionary in Tijuana, and then we do the Sunday school ministry, and then children ministry, and then we try to equip the junior high school kids and after college kids as teachers, and then they never sin. They never had any education about that one. They never observed that one. It's hard. Just think about education is was ordinary people. For ordinary people, education is not really important, especially in the cities. Maybe in the middle class, they're willing to send their kids to college and support them. But poor people they don't even think about the children's education. The methodologies they're using, they don't know how to do anything. That's why we influence them a lot, and they have to follow. Educated missionaries are putting years of learning and expertise that can harm or hinder the new Christian from growing in faith. Do you know what I mean there? Growth processes kind of take time, and little by little. And a lot of Christians, if you go and then, even though they go to school like high school, and sometimes their education is really, really poor, very, very poor. It's not educated like missionaries here, and they high school and colleges, and then seminary schools, and art degrees. That is different. Sometimes and social and political perspectives are prominent in missionaries' home countries, like America has power over the other countries. Yeah, that one is kind of just think about how things involved in missions like this and influence others, and then what about the gospel presentation? When they hear when they hear the gospel and when they accept the gospel, and what is the degree of a convert? What I mean that they truly accept the gospel, or they wanna just agree in courtesy for the missionaries. We call the cultural courtesy, and if you I read it from the article. I read article from one of the native leaders in Latin America, and he said that when mission teams comes and they do big event and also call the people together, and then they sit down and what they preach, what they said, and agreed because of the cultural courtesy. That's a courtesy. So that's why, I'm willing to accept Jesus Christ, and they raise hand, that's a cultural courtesy. And just think about that's a kind of people coming to church, and then how can it change the worldview? How can it influence on their worldview? That's the big issue. That's the way. Maybe there's a lot of ways that created the paternalism, but here is some way that we can think. And how can we avoid the paternalism? How can we? Another word is maybe we can talk about later, but still, here is be transparent and honest by acknowledging that bias is embedded belief that everyone possesses. It means that sometimes our beliefs are embedded in our cultural baggage. We believe that my way is true, your way is wrong. My way is biblical, your way is not biblical, not all the time. Right? That one is, we gotta acknowledge it. Be humble. Even though I'm educated, and even though I have a lot, just think about the crime we call the white crime. Killing someone is nothing. The white crime is big. Embezzlement of the company is huge and big. What is the crime? So influenced a lot of people's life. So bigger than the one people died, right? Suffering a lot. People. What about another thing is to be a learner first rather than the teacher. If you go to other countries and culturally you don't know the language, You cannot be a teacher though until you learn English. But I know a lot of people use the translator to work right away, and then sometimes it's not a good idea though. Even though you use a translator and then but you teach based on your culture. You don't understand the people's cultures. As long as you don't learn the language. Language is the very, very basis of the culture. You cannot learn their culture without knowing your language, right? So whenever I take the mission teams, I always emphasize that be a learner. They are different, but they are created by the image of God. I know they are growing and their country are poor, they are poor, but we have a little more than that. But what about others? We compare who has billionaire, we don't have nothing. It's the same. Just think about we have a little more than others and then we look down on them and then we have a superiority. What about compare with the who has a billionaire, who has a higher degree than you have, and come look down on you, how do you feel? Right? So be a learner, be a learner. You don't speak their language and you don't understand their language and you don't know the culture, and be a learner. But once I took a team and then we tried to teach English. One guy is really, he's not mature, and then I was really concerned about that, and about people why we are preparing, because their motivation was not right, and he was really frustrated, and then he said they're so stupid. No, don't say that. He said by himself, and I heard. Kind of mad. Just think about yourself and don't compare with poor people and yourself, and don't look down on them. Always, bad one is above ourselves, and someone is there, right? Someone is better than us, someone is above us, right? Be a learner, especially in the cross-cultural context. Be your partners rather than power broker, allowing the community to share their needs and then form joint strategies to address them. What about the power broker? Still control, right? We already talked about the parts. What are the challenges? What are the practical ways? If you have superiority, it's hard to get a partnership with them. We always try to teach them. I know some, when I traveled to other countries for church missions, and then I can see a lot of things from the missionaries. They don't understand what they want. They don't understand what they want to do. Always they want to control in their way, missionaries in their way. They don't understand local basic cultures, what they like. There was once it's not a big deal. And then they bought a building, there's local churches, and then there was kind of celebrating the first implanting, buying a building and first service there, and then they really celebrating, and then the week before next Sunday they're gonna have it, but the missionary stopped by. We were in there, right? you are there in there for missions, and then missionary they color the buildings, but missionary don't like the colors. Why use the color? The local church members and pastor have a meaning for the colors, but they are not happy with it like this. It's not a partner, even though they support to buy buildings, but what? We want to control issues there. That's why the paternalism is born. Okay, so try to be co-leaders in relationship of equals. Not every, it's not easy, but always they are they have a less education, less resources, but think about ourselves in God's eyes. If you really want them to become a leader for their people, you gotta respect them. They wanna learn from you, right? They think that he's the missionary. You guys are spiritual leader of the churches, and then they learn from you, and then they want to exercise the same thing to the other people. That's not a good model. That's the church, kind of culture form. Okay, so even though you start a missionary as a pioneer, and then you have new believers, and try to see who can really have a character, and then potential leaders, and then disciple them. And you gotta work together, and as times by and give them some, delegate some lead by leader and let them in charge for the ministry. You are the foreigner, right? And if you have something in the country you cannot stay anymore, and then what? Who's gonna take care of it? The indigenous leader. But if you don't teach anything, if you don't give any leadership, and he don't know how to do. But he remember what he has done to you, right? And then what? Just to follow the way, that it's not healthy. And so we need to be kind of accountable to the gospel, not to the culture. It means that why we are there, to preach God's word, not deliver your culture, right? If you're a missionary, you don't go to the other country because you wanna, like a long time ago, that's imperialistic ideas. That's a colonistic ideas. We going there to share the gospel, to let them know who Jesus Christ is. Okay? So eventually the paternalism kind of create a dependency. They don't wanna independent, and they're kind of losing the motivation for the people, their people. Always rely on, I don't know because I don't have this. That's why we gotta be careful. So this is a big issue though. This is a really big issue. And when you go down to Mexico and Tijuana, people needed to know that though. And they don't wanna have one mission team really supporting their church. The mission teams are really generous, and then they're gonna provide all church fund. They don't worry about it. Eventually, they rely on the mission team. They don't want to do their own work. They don't want to reach out to their own people, and they don't want to build up their own faith community. Even though they don't do it, still church is going on without any financial issues. That's why when you go, the lot of pastors in China and then the indigenous pastors in China try to be connected with the mission teams, church mission team. They are resources of the violence. If that formed kind of paternalism and dependency. What about the syncretism? It's one of the form of last week we talked about the contextualization, and contextualization is that in speaking kind of each way, speaking each way is try to kind of present the gospel in their language, in their culture, so that the indigenous people understand easy the gospel. And like this, and then I dress like this, and like a Hudson Taylor, one of the examples, when he tried radically tried to contextualize himself to the Chinese, and then he usually at that time, and they have a missionary compound, it's a missionary community here, and they live here, and then they separate from the outside local people, indigenous people. They live there, and then when they go out, and then who believe in Jesus Christ, and then bring in, educate them, and bring out like this. But totally, maybe they are not. They live there, but mostly they are not engaged with local peoples, indigenous people. But Hudson Taylor is get out of the compound, he go into the peoples. And he had beard like a Chinese, he wear the Chinese clothes. Right? That is contextualization. So, but when you preach the gospel, and then just think about, and gospel is really boring to them, they never heard before, a lot of people. But they don't understand. Maybe some stories. But think about it, and that's why Don Richardson said that there is some similar stories there, and you can use that one and present the gospel. Maybe they need to understand the gospel. Right, that's why that we said in contextualization, and then we bring this culture down to their culture, because transform to their culture, and they can understand each the Bible and the gospel, because they never heard the kind of cultures, they never heard about God. They are different from their God. And that's a contextualization, the basic definition that we learned in first class, and there is, when you contextualize something, and but a little bit guided the wrong way, and then you can create different things. That's syncretism. It's not a mixed way, then come out totally different things. And like one example is that in Guadalupe, and they don't call Mary. And I think I told you, right? And there is no Mary, but the other country is Mary, and then they have indigenous figure of Mary, and they put together, and it came out Guadalupe in Mexico. But think about, where is the Guadalupe in Bible? No way. In Catholic. So, totally different and combination of different form of belief or practice, right? And put together and came out different things. Maybe it's easy, one of the example is already easy to understand the syncretism, the feast of Christmas. And when I educate the missions, I use a lot of clips, especially for cultures. And one guy from Africa, and they had a chance to travel to America, and then some hosted and travel and covered all things, and he came to America like a Christmas season. And they celebrate the Christmas and then celebrate what? And whole things. And he said how, and Santa Claus is related to Jesus Christ. Right? Can you see that? And we had a lot of tradition and light and Santa Claus and where it came from. But this is a part of the culture during the Christmas. Where it comes from, when Cambia came into Christianity and the part of cultures. That's American culture, it's not the other cultures. Christmas is one of the holidays, right? But even just think about when you go out and then a lot of countries and they don't have a Christmas. They have their own things. I didn't know when I go to Mexico and then they don't have Thanksgiving. Oh, we have Thanksgiving here. And I didn't know, and then I tried to explain the Thanksgiving, and then we have some craft, and then we do, and then but they don't have a concept though. So I figured it out, oh, there is no. But I tried to bring my concept to down, and we try to celebrate together. I know basically we try to give thanks to God for what He has done through the year, but it's not a Thanksgiving. Christmas celebration is different from us. They celebrate different day though, on not Christmas days. Think about the Christmas light. Here is a Christmas light, and then Christians decide to celebrate the birth of Jesus Christ, the light of the world, at the time of the pagan winter feast of the light, or feast of the sun. There, God was to suppress or to overwhelm the pagan feast by the good news of Jesus Christ. So many felt this was a syncretism. He advised accommodation as well. Yeah. That's true though, that's true. I still remember and when I grew up, because I went to church and that's why I know the Christmas. I never had a tree in my house, Christmas tree. That is only in the church, right? You're gonna know that. So, syncretism is really dangerous. And then, if you teach the gospel wrong, and then they have their own thing, made up their own thing, and they become a sector and cult, sect or cult. Here is some factors that create the syncretism. The gospel is frequently has been presented in a segment, partial way, and has not actively interested with the dominant theme of the local culture. And that's why usually the problem when you interpret any kind of books or Bibles and other things. And if you skip the context, sometimes you misunderstand the author's intention, right? And if you take a test in the way, you're gonna wrong. Same thing. Don't take the Bible partially and apply to other stuff. When we really wanna take, that's the one of the start. And then, even though the local culture is here and the Bible is here, and you gotta dissect the local culture with the biblical perspective. I know the biblical culture is really foreign to them, and then think about how can you transfer this knowledge to their culture. That's a contextualization without your culture. Always think about the biblical cultures here and local cultures here, your cultures there. But a lot of people try to plant their culture to the local culture, their Christian culture to the local culture. And then people don't follow your culture, the local people don't follow your culture, they say they are immature. They don't have they are not for this one. Like kind of judgmental on the local people, right? So that's one thing that we needed to know. What is the biblical truth holy, right? Holy, and then understand the local cultures. And then we can find a way, how can we transfer biblical truth, and then they can accept it as it is. And that adoption, right? And second is following Western modes of the thought. Christianity too frequently communicated on the cosmological level without dealing with everyday's life issues. The everyday issue of their daily life. One example is that, how they just think about simple. Okay, who created the world? What happened when we die? And what need to do? Like always come with their knowledge and their thinking system is it's different from local people's daily life. They don't concern about their daily life. That's why. And think about it, understand the people's life, and then how can we deliver the biblical truth? How can we teach this biblical truth in into their daily life issues? If we don't, and then just to take some of them, right? And another way is that syncretism frequently occurs when the form of Christianity are accepted but are given traditional meaning. So different. So culture is different, right? But don't mix it with it. That's based on the different culture, but maybe you could use the analogy, redemptive analogy, but it's not the same. Don't give them the exact meaning. And then like a lot of Christians in my countries, and then they have the prosperity gospel. Prosperity gospel is based on our culture. Right? So you gotta know that, and just let them see that their own traditions, and let them see the biblical, context, that the truth, and then let them learn, and you gotta see how different, right? So, form is Christian, form of Christianity, not the same as the traditional meaning. So you gotta know, right? You gotta know that we gotta teach them, not to create weird different things. What about syncretism occurs when the assumption of tradition and culture are not adequately critiqued based on the biblical theology. I already told you, right? And finally, syncretism occurs when churches are not equipped to become the nurturing community. When you do missions, and then you guys, if you guys are missionary, and then go and teach them continually the Bible and Christian values and worldview, and equip them people with that one. Otherwise, but don't plant your own Christian, your cultural influence, right? It's not it's yours. So you gotta know your cultural baggages, right? You gotta know your Christianity. It's not a biblical. A lot of things are not biblical, but we think that force them to do it, because if you don't, and you are not a Christian, you are not much a Christian. Like smoking and what is that? Drinking is a big issue in Korea. What about the morning prayer? Nowadays in America, I know a lot of pastors don't do morning prayer, but even the mission field, and they go to and try to teach and the people, and they force them to come out. If you don't, and you're not equipped, that's a time I learned that this morning prayer is really time to fully kind of focus on God by myself. That's a really good benefit. Just think about when you start the day and really busy, and no time to think about God, and no time to pray. But morning prayer, before you start the day, and just set aside 1 hour, 30 minutes, and read the Word of God and pray, and kind of personal time with God. It's really precious. Instead of that one, kind of make a rule, and then if you don't follow, you miss the morning prayer, you're not mature enough to serve others. Maybe that may be one of the criteria, but not all the time. That's our cultural baggage as a Korean Christian. So always we gotta teach them. We gotta one of the things maybe we gotta understand the Bible well. Historical and cultural. We know that the background. The Bible culture is different from the indigenous people's culture, and different from my cultures. I know, I'm from Korea, it's a kind of collective culture, it's similar, but they practice in different ways, right? That is maybe kind of creating a syncretism. So when we say syncretism, and there's a twisted, and from the contextualization, and kind of make another one, make different things. How can we overcome the syncretism? I already told you, and then understand the Word of God better. You gotta understand you gotta know the Bible well. when you interpret the Bible, we base, for the conservative Christians, we take the literal meaning. Literal meaning as it is, not allegorically, but based on the what? The cultural background and historical background. We respect the grammatical order, grammars. And we know the context, right? That's why interpreting Bible is really important. And then another one that you gotta understand the cultures. How different, and dissect dissect the culture, and then how can we struggle with how to apply, how can teach them, understand, how to understand the biblical truths. How can they accept in their cultural setting? That's a contextualization. And then, when you deliver the biblical truths, be careful, not put your own culture, right? That is the way they will consider. Always check the Bible, but it's not focused on just a literal meaning. Okay, you gotta consider cultural and context, and then get the principle of the Bible through your studies, and considering all things, and then talk to the local cultures. That's the most important thing. Another thing is what is the ethnocentrism. It's based on the cultural superiority, and this is kind of people see the cultures their own cultural perspective. So just like if you go to other countries, poor countries and less educated countries, and unconsciously, I am more civilized, and by education, and I have a higher living standard, and I have more wealth. Like then, we are Americans, so we can do anything, like kind of attitude. And still, there is some superiority among missionaries, and Western missionaries can look down on the national missionaries and local other missionaries. So we gotta be careful though. So, and your belief, your culture, and it's not a standard of living life. Everybody has, every culture has their own standard of living. Whether it's developed and whether it's stick on their tradition, but who said it? Which one is better? Maybe we are used to the American cultures, and what you know what is comfortable, what is convenient. People are still pursuing. That's why they try to make money. And if you live like your own house, and then it's better than the living in rent and rent an apartment or house. Because you can do whatever you want. It's convenient. It's comfortable. You can fix your house in the way that you really want. But if you rent a house, you cannot do it. You gotta, if you did, and then you gotta fix it back to the original setting, right? Why ethnocentrism is not good? It's a think about the rest of the still historically, just see the other people in your cultural perspective, your own practice and behavior and knowledge, and then what? Judge other cultures like caused what? Genocide, killed a lot of people. What about the World War One? What about the Holocaust? What about the racism in America? What about the racism in Korea, in China, in other countries? Not America, but it's a lot. Sometimes worse than America. Yeah, that's why ethnocentric attitude is created paternalism. Right? You are not qualified this one, and you gotta kind of under me, you gotta be under me, and you gotta do what I ask. What about cultural imperialism? Eventually, influence on them, my culture is better than yours, right? The culture, and you want to do something else. That's a cultural imperialism. And ignoring the biblical cultural relativism, I already told you, right? The biblical cultural relativism. Every culture is unique, and whether it's crude and whether it's not good, because of the maybe there's a lot of things based on the religion. But not everything, right? And what about the disrespect? Yeah, disrespect. It kind of hinder the race of local leaders, right? Someday, if we just think about if we are missionaries and then go to other countries, maybe 20, 30, 40 years, and then you're not going to die there. Nowadays, nobody thinks that way. Someday you're going to come back to your own country and retire from the ministry, and then anyway, someday, whether you die there or leave the country, and you're not going to be there forever and ever. Respect them, right? And if you have ethnocentrism, you have difficulties in communicating the gospel. You don't understand their cultures, you don't understand their and maybe you can have a technique to communicate with the basic things, but you don't understand their culture as well. It's hard to communicate. How can you communicate gospel? Maybe we can deal with the literal meaning though. This is God created the world, and people kind of break the covenant. They have become sinners, and Jesus Christ came to the world to what? Maybe you can say about basic component of the gospel, whether they understand or not, right? There is a lot of nationalists. They want to keep their own tradition, but they are really interested in gospel, right? They don't respect you eventually. So biggest another ethnocentrism is kind of hindering them communicate with the local peoples, indigenous peoples, because if they look down and they close their mind, heart, you gotta know the cultural courtesy. Yes, but not really. That's why the gospel, when you deliver to the local people, and then didn't go into the what? Changing the worldview. How can they transform, to be, how can they will be transformed after they accept the gospel, Jesus Christ? That is coming up, and when you hear the gospel and what, there's a world will crash. Totally different world. Especially to think about Hindus and Hinduism and Muslim, Islam. Right? It's a big dangerous. What about the discipleship? Why the discipleship is the issue? When you go to countries and then when missionaries go to other countries and then they evangelize and then build a church, but if they don't work with the people, the indigenous people, to transform their life by the gospel, the word of God, the Christianity is not there eventually. Discipleship is coming out to become like Jesus Christ, right? Live a life with Jesus Christ and live a life in the Word of God. And that's a process. And teach them and help them find themselves in God's Word and help them to grow in the God's Word and help them to become kind of equip themselves to serve others. That's a discipleship process. Just okay, you evangelize others and then, you become a Christian and come to church, and sometimes the discipleship is not enough with the Sunday service. Bible study, sometimes if you don't touch their individual life, it's not a discipleship. Just think about when Jesus Christ called the disciples, picked the 12 people, and they made them the disciples. They live together, and they eat together, they travel together, and then they teach them. So discipleship is based on the what? We're gonna communicate in life. If we don't just talk them in formal setting and formal conversation, like Bible study, this is for, and then if we don't touch their daily life with the Word of God, and it's hard to do that. Discipleship helps them to transform in their faith, right? But think about the missions, and we did a lot of missions, like we have the compassion mission, aid mission, mercy mission, whatever, and aid mission we did a lot. Who are struggling with life and poor and health, and then we try to go help them. And time I don't know, we proclaim the gospel, and then without the following up, and then we don't know whether they have become a Christian, how they grow, and then without discipleship, and that's all. I don't know whether they still stay as a Christian or they just gave up to their faith. Discipleship is there. Even though you do really like open ministry, if you do school ministry and teach them and provide like a lot of education, and then what if there is no discipleship? Maybe you can, the school that you provide, and then provide the education system. So how can we teach them to become a disciple of Jesus Christ? And that's a discipleship, right? To help them to become follower of Jesus Christ without any dependence, without any paternal relationship by themselves, independently. What is the purpose of missions? Maybe you could have a nice project and building nice churches and building a big community centers. What if the project doesn't impact on the community? What is the purpose of mission? What if your work, the missionary work, doesn't impact on the natives, transformational life? What is the ministry means to? So there is a lot of discussion between the evangelism and discipleship. And how do you define the evangelism? And just proclaiming the gospel? And nowadays, there are a lot of missionaries and scholars, and they don't think that way. You proclaim the gospel, and then what happened? And they grow in God, and they can reproduce, do the same thing. And who reach out to people, let them become let them preach the gospel again. So kind of think about the whole process. Without discipleship, you cannot do it. Right? So always, and then whatever the mission is, and then think about the discipleship. Right? So if you don't understand the discipleship, it's very simple. Very simple. But it's not discipleship is not like 1 year course, 6 months course. It's not a course, it's a life. It's a process. It's a process. You mean that lifelong process. Nobody's perfect, still learning little by little, but they are maturing, growing. That's a difference though. Right? Okay, that is a basic issue that we'll talk about in missions, and then paternalism, and I talk about the syncretism with the contextualization, and then a lot of times the big issues in the contextualization, the lack of contextualization in missions, and then I already told you, and then you guys just like this, and then just think about you guys are doing the BBS, vocational Bible school in other countries, and some countries don't have anything of the kind of activity. They never heard. But you bring all American styles, and whether they learn or not, and nothing, and then they never use anything after mission team left. That's for 3 days, that's all. Because even though you travel there, and then missionaries travel there and work, and there is any contextualization, and they're not gonna get anything. Just fun time, but sometimes it's not fun. Maybe it's make it, fun time activities, but I read an article about it's written by a missionary kids, I don't know, mission team came, and they had a really great time, and a lot of kids that came to church, and 3-4 days, and they really great time, and then after they went back, the mission team back, and then nobody showed up. So, and he asked the kids, why don't you come to church? And then he said, it's not fun anymore. just think about the whole activity you guys bring into the indigenous church, and then always think about how can they can maintain and how can they do in their ways. A lot of mission team buys a lot of stuff, and sometimes they use the material that they cannot get. And they have to use the money, but they don't have enough money, and then how can they do that? Right? That is a failure of the contextualizations. So it's a lot of things to talk about and think about. That is just really basic stuff that you gotta think about it when you engage in missions, and then maybe give you clear direction of the how can you engage missions. Kind of escape from the lack of discipleship, and always think about the Harold Fuller said the 4 stages, and each stage could maybe have some problem, but still, how can you help the people to be independent? How can you help the people understand the gospel? Not your way, not your perspective, and from their perspective, right? And how can we follow them up? If you can't, how can missionary follow up? Right? That is a very important thing. And that's why when I do missions, and then when we go to short-term missions, so I really focus on my teams really focus on the relationship, really focus on the indigenous people center, and really try to raise up the local leadership. And whenever we start missions, and then as times go by and we kind of involve in the local churches people. Okay, someone cooked, and then okay, can you come over and can you help us? And then they take over that one, and then we don't have to cook, just buy some and food, and then they can cook it, and material. And just we teach them how to do the Sunday school and how to do that, and then they have their own way. Like, I was really surprised though, and when we started the Sunday school, and we wanted to kind of attendance sheet, and then kind of chart and make it, you got a name on it, and each week who came to church or not, and then we want to help them to organize the ministry, and then attendance chart, and then I usually kind of I never it's a cultural difference, and then I didn't have much time to make the bulletin board for each class. They have their own bulletin board, and they have the attendance chart and announcement, all kind of stuff, and then because they divide the age groups, and then they made their own things, and I didn't know, and I don't have enough time, and that's why I use a lot of staples, and then decorate, use the staples, and then put it, brought it to the, down to, brought it, and then they saw it, and then next month we saw that they do the exact same thing what we did. And I really shocked, and then you don't have to do it, so just to do your own way. You can decorate your own way, right? I give them kind of freedom to do that. They decorate better than us, a little bit different style. And then I taught them to make a chart. It's like usually my way is like name is like vertical, no horizontal, and kind of V is kind of vertical. I kind of used to that one, and when I grew up at churches, then we use that one. So vertical is each week, and we can still the correct bar graph who is coming out, who missed the one, and that's the name is and attendant is kind of horizontal, and then we saw that it's a kind of different way though, reverse way. They put the what is it? The V is kind of V to the horizontal, and the name is vertical. So it's kind of it's not easy to see that, but we didn't say anything, but they still making their way. So I thought it's a different way, but they have their own way, right? And decoration is kind of different though. Just think about our teams from Korea. They are Korean Americans, and they from Korea, and then kids are born here, and then grow up here, and then kind of different, but they take their own styles, Mexican styles. It's not a big thing, but they learn how to apply in the way, right? It's not changing the biblical truth, and then it's okay. But when we teach the gospel, really be careful, right? And that's my experience that contextualization is very, very important, right? And don't say that my culture is better than yours, it's higher than yours, and then we are all equal in God. We are the same. God's eye. God doesn't count how much you have. God doesn't count how much you know. God does count how faithfully you follow me. You live in my word. That's God's counting. Anyway, we talk about some issues, some missions. Maybe it's a lot of things, and it depends on the work. And I didn't talk about the detailed stuff, and then maybe, if you want to talk about that one, and let me know. And maybe I never heard, but so I'm willing to, gradually to hear you guys. If you have any questions, just let me know. Okay, we have 2 more weeks and 1 more week, and we're gonna kind of think about the church and missions, and then next week, and there was one of the popular event at church is short missions. So we have 2 more weeks. So okay, guys, and then I hope it's kind of opportunity to learn about missions, and then but I know today is kind of a little bit negative side, but think about the positive side. How people are